The moment the police cars screeched to a stop in front of my house, I knew something was wrong. I stood frozen, dripping wet, still in my swimsuit, my heart pounding in my chest. Red and blue lights flashed wildly, reflecting off the water of my pool. The officers jumped out, hands hovering near their belts. "Step away from the pool," one of them barked. I raised my hand slowly, confused. "What? This is my house." Before I could say anything else, I heard the voice that made my stomach twist with anger. "This woman is trespassing." Karen screeched, her voice sharp and self-righteous. She stood on the other side of my fence, phone still in hand, her short blonde bob bouncing as she pointed at me. "I told you she didn't belong here." The officers hesitated. One of them gave me a careful once-over. "Ma'am, do you have proof this is your property?" "Proof? Did I need proof to swim in my own pool?" My fingers clenched into fists. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I do. My ID is inside." "Likely story," Karen sneered. "People like her are always trying to sneak into places they don't belong." I whipped around to face her, rage bubbling in my chest. "People like me?" Her lips curled into a smug smile. "Don't act innocent. I saw you climbing over the fence." That was a straight-up lie. But before I could argue, something shifted in the officer's stance. One of them glanced between me and Karen, his brow furrowing slightly, as if he wasn't entirely convinced by her story. Then, before anyone could say another word, another voice interrupted. A deep, firm voice that made Karen's entire face drain of color. "Officer, I suggest you take a step back." We all turned at once. And that's when the real twist began. A tall man in a sleek black suit stood at the edge of my driveway. His polished shoes gleamed under the flashing police lights, and the confidence in his voice cut through the tense air like a knife. Karen's face paled instantly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The officers straightened up, their hands no longer hovering near their belts. This man wasn't just some random neighbor. He had power. You could feel it. "Sir, this is a private matter," one officer started, but the man raised a hand. "I'm not asking," he said calmly, but there was a sharp edge beneath his words. "I'm her lawyer, and you're making a big mistake." "My lawyer?" I didn't even know who this guy was, but the way Karen's face twisted into panic told me she did. I called because she was trespassing," Karen stammered, her voice no longer as bold. The man took a slow step closer, his expression cool and unreadable. "You mean to tell me you called 911 on the owner of this property?" "She can't be the owner," Karen blurted, then immediately clapped a hand over her mouth as if she realized she'd said too much. My blood boiled. I knew exactly what she meant. In her narrow mind, a black woman with a pool in this neighborhood was impossible. The man didn't flinch. "You do realize false reports to the police are a crime, don't you?" Karen's smugness vanished. She actually backed up a step, her hand trembling around her phone. The taller officer cleared his throat, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said to me, "if you could provide proof of ownership, we'll clear this up." Gladly, I spun around and marched toward my house, dripping water across the porch. My fingers trembled with anger as I grabbed my wallet from the kitchen counter. By the time I returned, Karen was hugging herself tightly while the man in the suit stood, watching her like a predator circling his prey. I handed my driver's license to the officer, my name and address printed clearly in bold letters. "Here's your proof." He scanned it, let out a long sigh, then handed it back. "Everything checks out." His voice softened just a bit. "Apologies for the trouble, ma'am." Trouble? That didn't even begin to describe what Karen had put me through. But the man in the suit wasn't done. "I hope you're documenting this," he said smoothly, pulling a sleek phone from his pocket. Considering Ms. Johnson, he gestured toward me, was harassed and humiliated on her own property. There are legal consequences for racial profiling, you know. Karen's eyes widened with terror. I didn't mean... "Oh, you meant it." I cut in sharply. "You've been watching me since I moved in." I didn't think her face could get any paler, but it did. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough for the tension to thicken. "And I suggest you tread carefully, Ms. Collins," he said, addressing Karen directly. "Because once Ms. Johnson presses charges, you'll regret tonight." For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a flicker of power shift in my favor. But I had one burning question. Who was this man, and why was he helping me? And that's when things took an even stranger turn. Karen stood frozen, her face a mask of panic. The flashing police lights painted her pale skin in streaks of red and blue, but her usual arrogance had vanished. I wanted to savor the moment, but my curiosity burned hotter. Who was this man in the sleek black suit? And why did Karen look like she'd just seen a ghost? Why are you helping me? I finally asked, turning to face him. The man slipped his phone back into his pocket and smiled faintly. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile people give when they know everything. Let's just say, I've been watching the neighborhood closely, and people like her, he tilted his head toward Karen, have a habit of causing problems. His words hung heavy in the air, and I could feel Karen's eyes burning into my back. But I didn't care. She wasn't in control anymore. The officers, clearly eager to escape the growing tension, nodded and turned back toward their squad car. We'll close the report, one muttered. Sorry again for the misunderstanding, ma'am. I didn't bother replying. My heart still thudded in my chest, a mix of anger and confusion as the officers drove away, leaving me alone with Karen and the man who had just turned my world upside down. Karen's lips quivered as if she wanted to speak, but for once she stayed silent. And then, without another word, she spun on her heel and practically ran back toward her house. She won't bother you again tonight, the man said smoothly. But something tells me this isn't the first time she's crossed a line. I folded my arms, still dripping wet, my patience hanging by a thread. No, she's been at it since I moved in. But why do you care? His expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to catch it. Something deeper simmered beneath his calm exterior. Because this isn't the first time Ms. Collins has caused problems. That raised every alarm in my head. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? A long pause stretched between us before he finally answered. Let's just say there are things about this neighborhood, and about Karen, you should know. I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. And you? I demanded. You just happen to show up when I need help? Who are you really? The man gave a slow, knowing smile, as if he was weighing how much to tell me. My name is Marcus. I used to live here. A few years ago, Karen tried to ruin my life too. I blinked in shock. What? He nodded, his voice darker now. She didn't just call the police on me. She nearly destroyed everything I had. A shiver ran through me. I'd always known Karen was nosy, controlling, but this was something else. What? I asked. Why would she target you? Marcus's jaw tightened, the charm in his voice fading. Because I was different, and I had something she wanted. I swallowed hard. There was more to this story, a lot more, and I wasn't about to let him walk away without answers. Tell me, I insisted, my voice steady. What did she do to you? For a long moment, Marcus didn't answer. But when he did, his words shook me to my core. She tried to take my house, he said quietly, and she almost got away with it. I felt the air leave my lungs. Karen, stealing a house? But as unbelievable as it sounded, I could see the truth written all over Marcus's face. And somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. The air felt heavier now, thick with secrets no one had dared to speak aloud. My heart pounded as I stared at Marcus, my brain racing to piece together his words. She tried to take your house. I repeated, almost not believing it myself. Marcus gave a slow nod, his jaw clenched tight. And if I hadn't caught her in time, she would have. I shook my head in disbelief. How was that even possible? He took a breath, as if deciding how much to reveal. It started the way it did with you. Petty complaints, calling the police, trying to make me feel like I didn't belong. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted me out, and she almost pulled it off using the HOA. My stomach twisted. The HOA? Marcus let out a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it. Karen isn't just a nosy neighbor. She used to be the HOA president. She had power, and she abused every ounce of it. Fines, fabricated violations, anything to make me miserable. When that didn't work, she tried to claim my house violated HOA rules, which would have forced me to sell. I felt a cold shiver crawl on my spine. I'd heard of overzealous HOAs before, but this was something else. But how did you stop her? A shadow crossed his face. I fought back. I dug into her past. And what I found? He paused, his voice dipping lower. It was worse than I imagined. What did you find? I asked, barely above a whisper. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather folder. He held it for a moment before offering it to me. See for yourself. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. The first page made my breath catch. Property fraud investigation, Karen Collins. My eyes scanned the words quickly, and the deeper I read, the more horrified I became. Karen hadn't just targeted Marcus. Over the years, she had a pattern, harassing new homeowners until they gave up and moved out. And every time someone left, guess who just happened to know a buyer willing to take the property off their hands? She was flipping houses. I muttered, disgust curling in my stomach. Marcus nodded grimly. And making a fortune. But it didn't stop with harassment. She forged documents. Changed property lines. Anything to drive people out. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor. Karen was a criminal, hiding in plain sight. But why didn't the police stop her? I asked, confused. If you knew all of this. His mouth tightened into a thin line. Because she's smart. She knows how to cover her tracks. She's had years of practice. And he hesitated. And what? Marcus's voice dropped lower, like he was about to reveal something even worse. Her husband. He's a lawyer. A very powerful one. Anytime someone got close to exposing her, he buried them in legal threats. Most people couldn't fight back. I couldn't speak. The woman who had called the cops on me, who stood at my fence acting like I was some kind of intruder, had a criminal empire built on stolen homes. And no one had stopped her. Marcus stepped closer, his voice sharp with warning. You need to be careful. If she's coming after you, it won't stop here. She's already shown her hand by calling the police. Next, it'll be complaints. Fines. Maybe worse. A knot formed in my stomach, but I refused to let fear take hold. So what do I do? His lips curved into a slow, calculating smile. You fight back. And lucky for you, I know exactly where to hit her where it hurts. A spark of determination lit inside me. Kara might have picked the wrong people to mess with in the past, but this time, she had no idea who she was up against. What's the plan? I asked, bracing myself. Marcus's smile deepened, his eyes gleaming with a fierce resolve. We expose her, and when we're done, she'll wish she'd never called 911. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of her downfall. I stood on my porch, the night air cool against my wet skin, but my blood was boiling. Karen had tried to paint me as a trespasser in my own home, but now, thanks to Marcus, I knew the truth, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Marcus leaned casually against the railing, but there was nothing relaxed about his expression. His sharp eyes were focused, calculating. If we're going to bring her down, he said, we need to be smart. Karen's slippery, but everyone makes mistakes. And I know exactly where to start. I folded my arms. I'm listening. He pulled his phone out, scrolling quickly before holding it up for me to see. This is public property data, he explained. Karen's been buying up houses in the neighborhood under fake LLCs. She uses different company names to hide the pattern, but I've been tracking it for years. I squinted at the screen, the list of addresses sending a chill down my spine. How many people has she done this to? At least 5 families that I know of, he said, jaw tightening. And I'm willing to bet you weren't her next accident. You were her next target. The thought made my stomach twist. So how do we stop her? A slow smile curved his lips. We hit her where she's weakest, her reputation. He tapped the folder he'd handed me earlier. This is everything we need to expose her to the HOA board and the community. But that's not all. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Karen's biggest weapon is fear. She counts on people being too scared or too exhausted to fight back. If we can break that hold, she loses everything. A fire lit inside me. I was done being polite. Karen had messed with the wrong woman. What's the first step? I asked, my voice firm. Marcus's smile widened. We gather evidence. Real, undeniable proof. I already have documents, but we need witnesses. People she's harassed. People she's scammed. If we can show the HOA and the local news what she's been doing. He let the words hang in the air, and I knew exactly where he was going. She'll lose everything. I finished. Exactly. A fierce determination surged through me. Karen had humiliated me tonight, but that was nothing compared to what we were about to do to her. Marcus straightened up. I'll start making calls to a few of her former targets. He arched an eyebrow. You keep your eyes open. Watch her. If she's planning to come after you, she'll slip up eventually. And when she does, we'll be ready. I nodded, my heart pounding with adrenaline. Let's do it. But just as I was about to turn back inside, a movement caught my eye. Across the street, hidden half behind a tree, Karen was watching us. Her face was twisted with rage, but beneath it I saw something else. Fear. And if she was scared now, she had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up with one thing on my mind. Karen was going down. I wasn't about to let her treat me like I didn't belong in my own home. And with Marcus's help, we finally had the tools to fight back. I stood by my kitchen window, sipping coffee as the golden rays of sunrise poured in. Across the street, Karen's pristine white house sat like a fortress. But I knew the truth. Beneath her polished image was a mess of lies. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus, got 2 former neighbors willing to talk. They've got receipts. I'll call later. I smiled to myself. Karen's carefully crafted world was about to crumble. But as I slipped on my shoes to head outside, something strange caught my eye. Karen's garage door was open. Curiosity tugged at me. I knew I shouldn't care, but after everything I'd learned, every move she made felt suspicious. I casually strolled outside, pretending to water my plants, when I saw it. A man, tall, dressed in an expensive gray suit. His salt and pepper hair was neatly slicked back. His face was sharp, like he'd never lost an argument in his life. And the moment I saw him, I just knew. Her husband, the lawyer. He was rummaging through the trunk of a sleek black car, his hands moving fast, almost too fast, like he didn't want anyone to see what he was doing. I squinted, trying to get a better look without being obvious. He pulled out a heavy, locked briefcase and slammed the trunk shut. When he turned toward the house, our eyes met. A chill ran down my spine. There was something off about him. His stare was cold, calculating. And then, without a word, he vanished inside. I hurried back into my house, my heart pounding. I needed to tell Marcus. By the time Marcus arrived, the sun had shifted high into the sky. He parked down the street, walking toward me with a purpose. You said you saw her husband? He asked, leaning on my porch railing. I nodded. Yeah, and he wasn't just visiting, he was handling something important. It felt secretive. Marcus's face darkened. That makes sense. When she targeted me, he was always the cleanup guy. Whatever dirt Karen stirred up, he made sure it disappeared. I clenched my jaw. Well, not this time. What's next? He pulled out his phone. I'm meeting one of her former victims this afternoon. She lost her home to Karen's fake violations. If we can document her story and combine it with the others, we have everything we need to expose her. I finished, a fierce thrill burning in my chest. Marcus smiled, but before he could respond, a loud bang echoed across the street. I whipped my head around. Karen was standing on her porch, slamming a cardboard box against the railing. Her eyes locked onto me, venomous and cold. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she stormed back inside. Marcus let out a low whistle. Looks like someone's feeling the pressure. I laughed dryly, but there was no missing the unease prickling at the back of my neck. Good. Let her squirm. But deep down, I knew. Karen wasn't done with me. Not yet. And her next move? It was going to change everything. I didn't have to wait long for Karen's next move. The very next morning, I woke to the sound of knocking, loud and angry, at my front door. My stomach twisted as I hurried to open it, expecting Karen's scowling face. But instead, I was greeted by 2 men in dark suits, their expressions cold and professional. Ms. Johnson, the taller one asked, holding up a shiny badge. I'm Detective Harris. We're here to discuss a property complaint filed against you. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. Karen, she'd escalated things again. I folded my arms and forced a calm smile. Let me guess, my pool. The other detective, shorter and stockier, narrowed his eyes. We have reports that you're occupying a property illegally. The complainant stated you may have forged ownership documents. I nearly laughed. I've lived here for 2 years, and I have the mortgage to prove it. But inside, I was furious. Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was trying to take my home. I kept my voice level. I'll be happy to provide paperwork. But let me save you some time. This is a false complaint, and I know exactly who filed it. The taller detective exchanged a glance with his partner. You're saying you know the accuser? I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding. Oh, I know her. And I have evidence that she's been running scams like this for years. A shadow moved behind me. Marcus stepped into the doorway, holding the worn leather folder we'd been collecting evidence in. His presence instantly shifted the energy, calm, confident, and ready. Good morning, gentlemen, he said smoothly. I think you'll want to see these documents. The detectives hesitated before accepting the folder. As they flipped through the pages, Karen's pattern of harassment, the fake LLCs, even testimonies from her former victims, their professional detachment began to crumble. This is substantial, Detective Harris admitted, flipping to a notarized letter from a woman Karen had forced out of her home. We'll need to verify this, but if it holds up, he looked up, his tone more serious. It could be criminal. I didn't flinch. It is criminal, and I'm not the first person she's tried to ruin. The shorter detective shut the folder. We'll open an investigation. And if your paperwork checks out, Ms. Johnson, you have nothing to worry about. I exhaled, tension easing just a little. Thank you. As they walked back to their car, Marcus grinned. We've got her. She doesn't know it yet, but we do. I wanted to believe it. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. And I was right. Later that night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, she struck again. I was closing my blinds when I noticed a car creeping down the street. The same black luxury car I'd seen her husband with. It stopped in front of my house. My heart pounded as a shadowed figure stepped out, carrying a thick envelope. I grabbed my phone, ready to record, as the man slipped the envelope into my mailbox and vanished. Marcus was already dialing when I turned to him. What now? He smirked. We open it. I pulled the envelope out carefully, ripping it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a stack of legal documents, papers claiming I was in violation of dozens of HOA rules. Rules that didn't even exist in the handbook. At the bottom was a formal notice. Request for property forfeiture. I felt my stomach flip. She's trying to steal my house. Marcus shook his head. Not this time. Tomorrow, we take everything we have to the HOA board and the media. By the time we're done, Karen won't just lose her power. His eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. She'll lose everything. I square my shoulders. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of her. Not of her husband. Not of anyone. Because Karen? She had no idea just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. And this time, she wouldn't see me coming. The next morning, I was ready. Tired? Yes. Stressed? Absolutely. But scared? Not anymore. Marcus had already left to meet with the HOA's legal counsel. Meanwhile, I was preparing for my part of the plan, delivering Karen's dirty secret straight to the local news. I slid the leather folder into my tote bag and took one last look at myself in the mirror. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had bullied and harassed people for years, and it was time someone stood up to her. As I stepped outside, my pulse quickened. Across the street, Karen's house stood eerily still. The curtains were drawn tight, and for the first time, there was no sign of her lurking on the porch. Good. Maybe she finally realized she was outmatched. But as I reached my car, a voice pierced the air. You think you've won, don't you? I froze. Karen. She stood at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, wearing her signature scowl. But today, there was something different, something desperate, in her eyes. I refused to let her rattle me. I don't think, I said smoothly. I know. Karen let out a bitter laugh. I warned you, she hissed. You should have just followed the rules. I tilted my head. You mean the rules you made up? Sorry, not playing your game anymore. Her face twisted with rage, but before she could respond, a sleek black car rolled up behind her. Her husband. He stepped out in his crisp suit, but something was off. His usually calm expression was strained, the sharpness in his eyes dulled. And for once, Karen seemed nervous. Marcus was right. She's slipping. Let's go, her husband muttered, gripping her arm. We have bigger problems. I smiled, running scared already. Karen shot me a look filled with venom, but when she spoke again, her voice wavered. This isn't over. I didn't flinch. Yes, it is. Without another word, they disappeared into the car, the engine growling as they sped away. And in that moment, I knew Karen's perfect little world was about to come crashing down. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Melissa Tran, a sharp-eyed investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing local corruption. She flipped through the folder Marcus and I had compiled, her brows arching higher with every page. "This is a gold mine," she murmured, pausing on the evidence of fake HOA violations and fraudulent property seizures. "And you're telling me she's been doing this for years?" I nodded. "And we're her latest targets. But I'm not just fighting for me. I'm fighting for every family she's driven out." Melissa leaned back, a thoughtful glint in her eye. "If I run this story, it's going everywhere. People will know who Karen really is, and she won't be able to hide behind her husband's legal tricks anymore." "That's exactly what I want," I said firmly. She smiled. "Then buckle up, because once this goes live, there's no going back." I exhaled slowly, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. But for the first time, I felt powerful. Karen had tried to destroy me, but now I was about to destroy her. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages, missed calls, notifications flooding in like a tidal wave. I squinted at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. Breaking news. HOA president exposed for fraud and harassment. Melissa did not hold back. The article was plastered all over social media, complete with screenshots of the fake violations, sworn testimonies from past victims, and even a section exposing how Karen's husband covered it all up with shady legal maneuvers. I barely had time to process it before my phone rang again. "Marcus, turn on the news," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. I scrambled for the remote and flipped to the local station. And there she was, Karen, standing on her front lawn, swarmed by reporters. The camera zoomed in on her face, but gone was the smug confidence. She looked rattled, pale, furious. "Is it true you falsified property records to push homeowners out?" one reporter demanded. "Did you personally profit from the illegal fines?" another asked. Karen's lips trembled, but she forced a tight smile. "These accusations are baseless. I've always acted in the best interest of this community." I snorted. "Liar." But the next question hit harder. "Why did you call the police on a homeowner using her own pool?" Her face went beet red, and for a split second, her mask slipped. "She doesn't even belong. She caught herself too late. The damage was done." The reporter tilted her head. "Are you saying Ms. Johnson doesn't belong in her own home?" Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. I leaned back, savoring the moment. She wasn't just losing control, she was drowning. By noon, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. People who used to whisper behind my back were suddenly on my side, sending messages of support. Some even dropped by my house, apologizing for not standing up to Karen sooner. The best part? The HOA board was panicking. Marcus had just sent me an email he'd intercepted. An emergency meeting was being called to discuss Karen's conduct. If the rumors were true, the board wasn't just kicking her off. They were preparing to sue. And just when I thought things couldn't get better, the black luxury car rolled into Karen's driveway. Her husband stepped out, but this time there was no slick confidence. He was furious. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when two snakes like them start to unravel, you listen. You said you had it under control," he barked, his voice carrying across the street. "I did," Karen snapped. "Until that woman. You ruined us, Karen." His voice shook with rage. "The firm is investigating me because of your stunts. We could lose everything." I covered my mouth, heart pounding. They weren't just falling apart. They were turning on each other. Karen tried to respond, but her husband slammed the car door shut and sped off, leaving her standing alone on the driveway. And, as much as she wanted to pretend otherwise, she knew she'd lost. The fallout hit faster and harder than I ever imagined. Within 48 hours, Karen's world collapsed like a house of cards. The HOA board, terrified of being caught in her mess, released an official statement. Effective immediately, Karen Thompson has been removed from her position as HOA president. We are cooperating fully with the authorities to investigate allegations of fraud, harassment, and misconduct. But that wasn't even the best part. Later that afternoon, while I was watering my garden, a familiar black luxury car pulled up, but this time, Karen wasn't driving it. Her husband. Only now, his expensive suit was rumpled, and his usual arrogant scowl had been replaced by something else: defeat. I watched from my porch as he stormed into the house. Less than 10 minutes later, he came back out, dragging 2 enormous suitcases behind him. Karen ran after him, shrieking loud enough to wake the dead. "You can't just leave me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "After everything I did for you." He spun on his heels, his face cold. "Everything you did? You ruined my career, Karen." His voice thundered across the lawn, drawing curious eyes from every direction. "The partners found out about your fake fines and your property scams. I'm on the verge of disbarment, and it's all because you couldn't leave that woman alone." I nearly dropped my watering can. Me? He was talking about me. Karen's face twisted in desperation. "We can fix this. I'll talk to the board. There's no we, Karen," he snapped. "I'm done cleaning up your mess." And just like that, he shoved the suitcases into his trunk, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving Karen, the once untouchable HOA queen, alone. But fate wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, while enjoying my coffee on the porch, a fleet of police cars rolled into the neighborhood. I almost couldn't believe my eyes as 2 officers marched up Karen's driveway. She barely had time to answer the door before they handed her an envelope, a court summons. Marcus, who had been waiting beside me, grinned. Looks like her scams caught up with her. Turns out, the other homeowners Karen had targeted came forward, dozens of them. And with the evidence we'd handed over, the authorities had enough to launch a full-scale fraud investigation. I watched as Karen's face crumpled. For the first time, there was no anger, just fear. A week later, at the HOA's annual meeting, Marcus and I sat in the front row as the board publicly apologized for the harassment I endured. I wasn't just cleared of any violations. I was given a formal letter stating my property rights were indisputable. Karen? She didn't even show up. Rumor had it she left town shortly after her husband filed for divorce. With the fraud charges hanging over her, she couldn't hold her head high anymore. Not here. And as I stood in front of my beautiful pool, the sun warm on my skin, I realized something. She tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she lost everything herself. And me? I was finally free.